Welcome back. This is part 2 of writing the new SAT essay. I'm Elizabeth Yoshida, and I'm glad you've joined me today. Let's jump right in. Here's our plan of where we've been and where we're going. Part 1 was an introduction and background to the new SAT essay. And in this video, part 2, I'll talk about the specific persuasive devices that are important to know. In the next videos, part 3 and 4, I'll get into how to read and analyze the passage and also my system for writing the essay. Here's a little bit of background. Again, I'm Elizabeth Yoshida and I live in California. I'm a public school teacher, private tutor, wife, mom, and I have a master's degree in education. I've made my resources available at a few different places. I have a website called Test Prep Spot, and you can also find my materials on Amazon and at Teachers Pay Teachers. That's it for background. On to the show. Persuasion is an art, as they say, and the ways to persuade are infinite. It's impossible to know them all, and the good news is you don't have to. Have you ever heard the saying, go a mile wide and an inch deep? Well, that means we could spend our time learning hundreds of persuasive devices, but you wouldn't know them very well. Or we could spend time learning a handful of important persuasive devices really well. That's called going an inch wide and a mile deep. That's what we'll do in this video. You're probably wondering how I determined which persuasive devices are important. Well, here's what I did. I read and studied the SAT sample and practice passages published by the College Board, and I determined the most commonly used persuasive devices in those passages. These are the ones that you should know very well, and they're the focus of this video. Let's revisit the prompt. Again, you're asked to read a persuasive passage and then write an essay in which you discuss the persuasive devices used by the author and how they're effective. Look at the words in darker print. You can discuss whatever persuasive devices you'd like to, but let's focus on the suggestions from the prompt. The college essay suggests that you find evidence, reasoning, and stylistic or persuasive elements in the passage. These 3 bullet points happen to fall into the 3 categories of persuasion, which are ethos, logos, and pathos. Coincidence? I think not. Quick background on persuasion. It means the act or activity of persuading people. How are people persuaded? By appealing to authority or ethos, appealing to logic or logos, and appealing to emotion or pathos. These happen to align with the 3 bullet points used in the prompt. Very convenient. So again, I looked at the sample and practice essays and identified the persuasive devices that the authors used. Then I considered how the device is persuasive. Was it evidence, reasoning, or a stylistic element? I then put it together into a chart. Here's that handy chart which puts the persuasive devices into the 3 categories of the 3 bullet points. It's available anywhere you can find my resources, and you'll also get lots of information in this video. The first bullet point from the prompt invites you to use evidence, such as facts or examples, to support claims. Some specific types of evidence that you might find in these reading passages are survey results, research results, statistics, facts, quotes from experts, and examples. It's important to recognize these when the author uses them, and it's also important to know how they are used to support the author's claim. They're effective because they back up the argument and give the author credibility. The next bullet point asks you to consider how the author might use reasoning to develop ideas and to connect claims and evidence. Now, reasoning is a fun one. The author's use of reasoning might not be obvious right away, and it may take an entire paragraph for an author to reason out his or her thoughts. However, when you read the passage, you will be on high alert for the use of reason, which makes it easier to spot. Some examples of commonly used reasoning are cause and effect, deductive, inductive, comparative, and pros versus cons. I've included a brief explanation of each of these, but I won't read through it. Feel free to pause and read on your own. What's also important to know is that an author might use reasoning because it justifies the argument. Reasoning makes the argument make sense. This appeals to the reader's sense of logic. The third bullet point asks you to consider how an author might use stylistic or persuasive devices such as word choice or appeals to emotion in his or her argument. The potential list of these is really long, but again, let's focus on what the SAT seems to focus on. They are diction, exaggeration, personal anecdote, repetition, irony, rhetorical questions, and imagery. Again, I have explanations for each on the slide, but I won't read them. Feel free to pause now and do that yourself. For the most part, these devices create an emotional response in the reader. For example, an author might use exaggeration to point out a worst-case scenario, which in turn might create a sense of fear or doom in the reader. Similarly, an author might use imagery to paint a picture in the reader's mind, which evokes an emotional response that is intended to convince the reader of the author's claim. And this is a continuation of the previous slide, listing some more stylistic or persuasive devices that relate to the third bullet point from the prompt. Let's go back to the big picture. The idea is that you become really familiar with these persuasive devices before you head into the SAT. Then, during testing, as you read the passage, you're identifying the devices being used and you already know how they are persuasive. Now, when it's time to write, here is how those persuasive devices will get weaved into your essay. Remember, I recommend writing a 5-paragraph essay. Paragraph 1 is the intro, 2, 3, and 4 are your discussions of each persuasive device, organized so that each device gets its own paragraph. And finally, paragraph 5 is your conclusion. Let's take a closer look at your intro and body paragraphs. In the intro, you'll identify the author, title of the passage, and the author's claim. You'll also write your thesis statement. Your thesis statement is your identification of the persuasive devices. For example, to convince his audience, Dr. Seuss uses imagery, repetition, and cause and effect reasoning. This is a very simple thesis statement, but it clearly tells your reader exactly what you plan to discuss, and you've also set up the organization for your body paragraphs. When you get into your body paragraphs, each one of these should identify the device, link the device to the passage, explain why the author used the link, and explain how the device is persuasive. I go into great detail about this method in my resources, and I know I've mentioned it before, but I keep bringing it up because I'm confident in my products and I put a lot of work into them. I also think my time and knowledge are valuable and deserving of compensation. I also think that if it's something you value, you'll be okay with paying for it. Also, if you do pick up one of my products, please know that I do appreciate your trust and support. Okay, we've just wrapped up part 2, and up next I'll have part 3, how to read and analyze the passage. And in part 3, I break down a sample passage and show you how to identify the persuasive devices used by the author. Right now, I'm putting these videos out as fast as I can produce them, which is about 1 per week. So if you do find these valuable, please be patient, more are coming. Once again, thanks for watching, and I hope this video was helpful. You can find more resources on testprepspot.com, Teachers Pay Teachers, and Amazon. I'm always interested in your comments and feedback. If you'd like to share some with me, please drop me an email at testprepspot@gmail.com. Thanks again.